I'm a fourth-generation South Dakota farmer from Britton, South Dakota. My family farming operation consists of 4,000 acres of crop in Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. In addition to farming, I also own and operate a commodities brokerage firm that trades commodity futures and options for farmers in the area. Presently, I serve as the Marshall County Farmers Union president, and today I'm here testifying on behalf of South Dakota Farmers Union. The work of South Dakota Farmers Union began in 1914 when farmers united to work together for the good of agriculture producers across our state. Together we continue our work as a nonpartisan, grassroots organization comprised of over 10,000 family farmers and ranchers. Over the course of our organization's history, we have continually advocated for equitable rail service for agricultural commodities, cooperation between the railway companies, healthy competition among railroads, protecting the shippers from excessive rates, and the continued improvement of rail services for our producers. We appreciate the Surface Transportation Board's recent efforts to closely monitor the rail industry's performance metrics and the service problems occurring in the rail network. South Dakota Farmers Union was fortunate to meet with officials from your Office of Public Assistance, Government Affairs, and Compliance on Thursday, March 27th in Fargo, North Dakota. 6 South Dakota farmers, including myself, informally met with the representatives from the STB and collectively shared our concerns over the rail service problems in South Dakota. While we understand the challenges in the rail industry face due to the extreme cold, there is a legitimate concern about how the delays and the lack of services are affecting the agricultural industry. These rail service problems have already begun to negatively impact our producers, and I want to draw your attention to 3 things that our agriculture producers are most concerned about. For South Dakota Farmers Union, our first major concern is the fluctuation in the grain commodity markets and how that has impacted and will continue to impact the farmers. In South Dakota and across our region, the basis has dramatically widened and can be directly attributed to the delay of rail services, lack of ability of rail cars, and grain not being shipped out of the Midwest. Basis is the term used to describe the futures price subtracted by the local cash price. It is calculated using a variety of components, including storage cost, profit margin for sellers, quality variations from the listed in the futures contract specifications, local market conditions, and most importantly, transportation costs. As a farmer, basis is critical in the marketing of crops. It helps to determine when the best time to sell. We use it as a way to hedge, evaluate cash contracts, and cash prices at a specific point in time. Basis can determine whether or not we make a profit on our grain. Typically during the spring, the basis narrows and is strengthened. But this year, it continues to dramatically widen because of the increased demand for trains to move commodities out of the Midwest. For an example, in Oaks, North Dakota, where I market most of my grain, the basis at this time last year for corn was minus 35 cents. This year, it's minus $1.10. For soybeans last year, the basis was minus 65 cents. Today, it is minus $1.50. For wheat last year, the basis was minus 40 cents. This year, it is minus 70 cents. Taking it one step further and using the basis numbers previously mentioned, I estimated the potential loss in farm income from last year to this year. Last year, North Dakota produced 396 million bushels of corn. Comparing the widening of basis from last year to this year, the resultant corn production would be a $297 million loss in farmer income. For soybean production, the loss in farmer income from last year to this year would be $62 million. And in wheat, it would be $82 million. For the 3 major grain commodities that are a combined estimated loss of $441 million in lost farmer income, simply from the change in the basis attributed from last year to this year. The current inability to move agricultural commodities is causing a loss of profit margins from our farmers and has the potential to increase if the problem is not corrected. This is taking money directly out of our farmers' pocket and is of great concern to our members. Secondly, Farmers Union continues to be concerned for the grain facilities in our state. With the decrease in rail shipments, grain storage facilities, both commercial and private, are currently maxed out of storage options. Many producers have signed contracts for grain facilities to need to deliver their grain by a set date. Because of the delay in rails, Some grain facilities have been forced to dump more grain outside on the ground to make room for the incoming bushels. With grain continuing to pile up, many facilities are unsure if they will be able to empty their stored grain prior to the upcoming harvest. If we are fortunate enough to have a large crop this year, the lack of rail service will only further exaggerate the problem. If a farmer cannot deliver his or her grain to a facility, their most likely options are to store it themselves, pile it on the ground, or leave it in the field. Each of these options comes with additional cost and potential for unnecessary monetary losses. The most precarious situation would be a farmer having to leave his grain unharvested in the field. Crops that have not been harvested after December 10th of the current calendar year will not receive federal crop insurance. A farmer would no longer be protected for any unseeable losses in his unharvested crop. If the grain facilities are not able to empty their storage capacity before the harvest, the consequences will be devastating to the agriculture industry and our producers. South Dakota Farmers Union third concern is the impact that the rail services issues are having on value-added agricultural products, including the renewable fuels industry. At this moment in time, rail services cannot handle value-added agricultural commodities, including ethanol and dry distillers grains, known as DDGS. The South Dakota ethanol industry is an integral part of the agriculture economy, having an estimated $3.8 billion economic impact and giving new market opportunities for farmers. Not only has the renewable fuel industry contributed to South Dakota farmers, it has become an integral component of our livestock industry. Livestock is raised on an estimated 56% of the farms in South Dakota. DDGS is an ethanol byproduct or a low-cost and efficient feed option for these livestock producers. South Dakota's 15 ethanol plants produce more than 3.2 million tons of DDGS for livestock feed each year. The continued inconsistency of rail service for the ethanol industry is negatively impacting the production of DDGS and may result in livestock industry having to seek alternate and more expensive feed sources. Unlike grain commodities, the renewable fuel industry in South Dakota is a constant market. The industry needs to continue to produce, and if it cannot ship ethanol, it has to lower its production capacity. Even today, South Dakota ethanol facilities continue to cut back on production. Some facilities have been trucking more ethanol because it is taking longer to receive empty cars. Additional cars are costing 5 to 6 times as much as the regular car rates. Nationwide, the ethanol industry was producing an average rate of 949,000 barrels per day this past December. By the first week in March of this year, ethanol output had fallen to 869,000 barrels per day due to the lack of rail service, not due to the lack of profitability. The negative impact the rail delays are having on the renewable fuels industry has added to challenges and burdens facing our producers. These challenges have also increased the price of ethanol to the point where it is no longer competitive in some parts of the country. Consumers who want to purchase ethanol are finding it harder to do so and paying more at the pump. The impact that the rail services issues are having on value-added agricultural products is very real and of the utmost concern to our members. While the challenges created by the rail service issues are complex, the solution is fairly clear. We need to collectively find a way to improve rail transportation so that it is consistent and reliable for grain commodities in South Dakota and the Midwest. In the short term, a concentrated effort must be made. Explicit shipping services to our grain facilities and reliable and consistent service is necessary for sustainable, newer, renewable energy fuels. Without resolving these two issues, our farmers will continue to lose profit and be significantly burdened with the brunt cost associated with the transportation cost. While a solution is real and possible, the advantage in the production of our grain commodities in the Midwest will place continued stress on our rail network's capacity. A long-term solution is needed to address the growing demand on our rail network. We are hopeful that STB's efforts will lead to a positive solution, and we strongly encourage STB to consider another informal meeting in South Dakota in coming weeks to learn more about the serious problems we are facing in our home state. South Dakota Farmers Union greatly appreciates and supports the continued investigation and monitoring of this issue, As you can see by those of us who have made the trip from South Dakota, this issue is utmost important to us, and we hope the short-term fix is attained as soon as possible. On behalf of South Dakota Farmers Union, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clemenson?
Good afternoon, Chairman Elliott and Vice Chairman Begeman. My name is Hal Clemenson. I'm a third-generation family farmer from Condie, South Dakota. I'm also the president of the South Dakota Wheat Growers Board of Directors, and I'm speaking today on behalf of myself and wheat growers, the largest local farmer-owned grain and agronomy cooperative in the nation, with more than 17,000 owners in North and South Dakota. Thank you for this opportunity to discuss the growing crisis agriculture is facing over the lack of timely rail service to ship our grain to domestic and foreign markets and bring in needed inputs for spring planting. I've given the recorder copies of the full version of the prepared statement for the record. In the interest of time, I will only read the highlights of that statement. Wheat growers annually handles over 160 million bushels of grain and 400,000 tons of fertilizer through our network of grain elevators and agronomy centers. But our system is now being strangled by a lack of dependable, timely rail service that is creating economic hardship and frustration on the grain side and uncertainty and anxiety on the agronomy side. This past fall, we saw shuttle train cycle times dramatically slow down. Shuttles we loaded harvest generally ship to the Pacific Northwest export market via the BNSF. A typical cycle time for loading in South Dakota, shipping to the PNW, unloading, and then returning to South Dakota for the next loading generally takes 12 to 13 days. Normally, a grain shuttle will load an average of 2.5 times per month and cycle back. But this fall, the shuttle cycled in an average of 18 to 20 days, or 1.5 trips per month. This increased cycle time effectively reduced the amount of grain shipped by a given shuttle by 40%. And our cycle times continue to deteriorate, with current cycle times pushed out to 24 days, or only 1.3 trips per month. The amount of time a shuttle sits at one of our facilities, waiting on the railroad after being loaded in 15 hours or less, accounted for most of this delay. Prior to this year, origin dwell times generally were less than 1 day. However, we have seen individual shuttles sit at origin for up to 10 days. Overall, dwell times have averaged over 5 days. Because of the railroad's slow performance, the grain handling industry, such as our cooperative, has suffered economic losses. We have provided you with an outline of those costs and losses in our prepared statement. Now, farmers like me are seeing lower prices paid at elevators as the market adjusts to the price due to higher shuttle train costs. The basis price for corn in our North and South Dakota trade territory is now approximately 50 cents or per bushel less than the average of the prior 2 years. An even more dramatic effect to my farming operation would be if my fertilizer supply does not arrive in time to effectively fertilize my crops this spring. There's additional detail about the overall economic effect in our prepared statement. The Canadian Pacific situation is also dramatically poor. The CP Railroad has recently sold the portion of the line that crosses the state to a short line operator and expects to close on that transaction in the next couple of months. However, as of early April, we still have not received all of our January car orders, nor any of our February, March, nor April orders. The CP is behind by 1,900 cars to South Dakota wheat growers. It is soon planting time in the Dakotas, and fertilizer needs to reach my farm and many others this spring. I have prepaid for my fertilizer needs for the year, but now I'm wondering if the railroad will be able to deliver. It's yet another economic crunch that is hitting us all. We have documented the effect that can have in our prepared statement. The BNSF has been the premier U.S. rail operator over the past decade. We truly hope that the recent congestion and slowing rail service issues can be resolved quickly, and they can meet or exceed prior performance standards. WECORS implores the Surface Transportation Board to protect agriculture's access to and utilization of the constrained rail capacity that this crisis brings. We do not want to see agricultural traffic deprioritized, or worse yet, demarketed. We would also ask the board to stay vigilant in monitoring the Canadian Pacific as the line in South Dakota has transitioned to a new owner. Until the ownership changes and the operating system rolls to the new owner, the CP still has an obligation to service the line and should not be simply allowed to walk away from the backload of cars that they have created this winter. We also urge you to continue to make sure agriculture's needs are heard and addressed. Dependable, timely railroad service is critical to our economic survival. Thank you for this opportunity to express my views and concerns. I am available to respond to questions the board may have.
Thank you. Mr. Darcy?
Good afternoon. I have a few slides I'd like to use. My name is John Doxey, and I'm president of United Sugars. We sell sugar. In fact, in a typical year, we sell 25 or more % of the sugar consumed in the U.S. The majority of our sugar we sell in covered hopper cars to large and small food and beverage companies across the country. You may recognize many of their names. These customers expect to receive their sugar on time, every time. Not part of the time, every time. The past few months, due to slow service on the BNSF, we have repeatedly disappointed our customers, costing them money and costing us money in lost sales. United Sugars is owned by 3 large U.S. sugar processors, including 2 sugar cooperatives in the Red River Valley area along the North Dakota and Minnesota border. These 2 sugar cooperatives, American Crystal Sugar Company, which owns the plants in red, and Mindak Farmers Cooperative, who owns the plant in blue, are owned by several thousand farmers in Minnesota and North Dakota, and the cooperatives operate 6 sugar processing plants shown on the map. Our farmer owners grow sugar beets. These are sugar beets. They harvest those beets each fall and deliver their beets to the cooperative for processing. Once harvested, sugar beets are stored outside in large piles until they're processed. The beets freeze while in these piles, which preserves them for processing. If the beets thaw before they can be processed, they spoil and must be destroyed. Beginning with the first harvest in September, the sugar beet refineries operate at full speed, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a race to process all the beets before April or May when they thaw. Any delay in processing, for example, a delay caused by an inadequate supply of rail cars, means we are likely to lose sugar beets, which means higher costs and lost revenue. 80% of the sugar produced by those 6 sugar refineries that I showed you on the map is shipped by rail, and each of those factories is served exclusively by the BNSF, and the sugar is shipped in rail cars supplied by the railroad. Just as our customers rely on us to provide excellent service, we rely on the BNSF to reliably supply rail cars to us so we can load them and deliver them to our customers in a timely fashion. This has not happened in recent months. The BNSF's inability to supply a sufficient number of rail cars and to move those cars to customers in a reasonable period of time has caused us numerous problems. We simply are not reliably supplying our customers. This has caused them to slow their production, incur extra costs, and buy sugar from our competitors. We're losing business. We've incurred significant additional costs to store sugar and to ship sugar by truck in the absence of reliable BNSF service. And we've had to slow production at 3 of our plants because the BNSF has not supplied sufficient rail cars to move the sugar. This is likely production is lost forever, meaning lost revenue. I estimate that the final bill incurred by United Sugars as a direct result of this poor BN service will be in the tens of millions of dollars, and that's assuming service improves quickly. We've heard of the BNSF's plans to purchase more locomotives, hire more people, add rail cars, and add track. But as we've heard today, it's not at all clear when we can expect cycle times to return to normal and stay at normal levels. Until that occurs, the current fleet of BNSF cars, hopper cars, assigned to transport sugar will be inadequate for normal operations. Given our dependence on the BNSF, not knowing when cycle times will return to normal and stay at normal levels makes it very difficult for us to effectively operate our business. Therefore, if it's going to take months or years to return cycle times to and stay at normal levels, we need to know that the BN is taking steps now to significantly increase the size of its sugar car fleet. Historically, the BNSF has been a great partner. However, performance over the past year has shaken our confidence in the railroad's ability to address its service issues quickly. We appreciate the board's efforts to help gain the assurance that service on the BNSF will quickly be restored to historically good levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just a few questions. Just with respect to the sugar cars, I did notice in BNSS the information that they gave us regarding sugar cars. They made a special point of referring to sugar cars, and there was a spike on March 21st that it showed that they placed a lot of sugar cars on that date or during that week. And I take it from your testimony that either those were past due orders and they're not really anywhere close to coming up to speed, and then has that also, this is a two-part question, continued? Have they continued to spot cars at that rate?
We clearly have seen some improvement the last couple of weeks, but we still have a backlog of late orders,
Okay.
a big backlog of late orders, and it's going to take us a long time to catch up. In fact, we're worried that we won't get the sugar moved out of our bins that we need to get moved out of our bins this year because we need those bins available for next year's crop. So we haven't shipped as much sugar in January and February and March as we'd like. We've got to ship more the next few months, and we're not getting rail cars as fast as we'd like to get them.
Okay, that's helpful, because I did see the spike, and it did strike me, so your testimony kind of explains that.
It's progress, but it needs to be even more progress and continue to improve at a rapid rate.
Sure, thank you. Just to the panel generally, and it's a similar question that I've asked other shipper panels. With respect to communication, have you been satisfied with the level of communication you've been receiving, or do you feel like there's a role that the board can play to improve that? I know we've gone up and tried to talk to several of you, but at the same time, we can play a pretty significant role in improving communication. I was wondering how you feel your communications have gone between yourself and BNSF and CP.
Well, with regard to CP, in the last couple of weeks, they went to no communication. And the comments have been made today about, moving grain over Canadian Pacific, over Chicago particularly. We're told time and time again, no, you can't load anything over Chicago. We have movements into northern Iowa that works excellent. We still can't get anything that'll bill east. Even our buyers, a couple of small trains of wheat lately, they went to extra efforts on load them in Minneapolis, and we struggled to get those cars. Barley cars that only go Minneapolis or Wisconsin, we can't get those either. But we're trying to work with them to come up with a plan that, we can go east, we can go west with some stuff, we can make it work, we want to go, but communication has really broken down.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Anyone else?
I think from Wheatgrowers' point of view, the communication with the BNSF has been pretty good. They're frustrated. We're frustrated. This is going to take a lot of time and a lot of money reinvestment into this rail system. From what I've heard on the railroads, they're reinvesting up to the level of their increase in business. On my farm, if I take on a bunch of new business or new land, I've got to put a lot of money into equipment and not just maintain. We feel that there needs to be a lot more reinvestment into the rail system than what is being planned at this point.
Thank you.
If I could add, I concur with Mr. Clemenson's comments. The communication with the BN has been very good, both at the local operating level all the way up to senior management. I think the frustration that we have is shared by the BN. We want to see results.
Thank you. And we did have a commitment by both railroads that they would work on their communications. It sounds like BNN, with respect to this panel, has been doing a good job. So, but we will hold people to that commitment as we go forward.
Thank you. Thank you all for traveling as far as you did and as quickly as you did to come and talk to us. Thank you also for going to North Dakota to meet with staff about 2 weeks ago or so. We're proud of their effort on our behalf as well. They've shared with us some of the things that were not too confidential. They let us know of the conversations and the great meetings that they had with you. Thank you. I'm sure you have Tom's phone number. Keep calling him. Mr. Clemenson, I'm curious. You touched on the fact that the concern is it's going to take time and investment. What are you guys going to do? I'm really alarmed by the next crop year, in the fertilizer, what you guys are talking about, the nutrient. Is there a plan B, a plan C? What can be done if, despite, let's say, that there are genuine efforts to get you what you need, it just doesn't arrive?
Well, on my personal farm, I have prepaid fertilizer, I have prepaid seed, I have crop rotations in place. It's hard to, at this point in time, the middle of April, to switch cropping plans because I can't get fertilizer for my corn. I don't know what I'm going to do. We're going to have to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. Our co-op is sitting full of fertilizer right now, but we turn those sheds 3 times. The investment in a fertilizer shed is huge, so you can't just have it one and done. You have to turn that 3 times. So we need the rail to resupply. One of the critical parts of this spring is it's getting compressed. There's not a lot of fertilizer going on right now. So as the fertilizer spreading season is getting narrower and narrower, so it becomes even more critical to be resupplied in a timely manner. I don't see how the railroads are going to get that done. It's scary. Our co-op's doing everything we can, but we've paid for the fertilizer. We're making all the contingency plans we can, but I don't know.
I can probably answer a little bit to that question too, as far as our farm, especially from a commodity broker standpoint. Learned from Mr. Dave Andreessen today, where I buy all my fertilizer, that, like he said, only 66% of it is going to be allocated to him. So I instantly start thinking about, okay, what's plan B for us? Where do we go? And I think I know what's going to happen for most farmers. You're not going to plant corn without fertilizer. You just won't. What happens if it gets too late, then we're going to switch to soybeans. That's fine, but as a supply and demand standpoint, what's that going to mean next year? We're going to produce too many soybeans. The prices will be low by fall. Brazil and South America, that's what they do right now, is produce a ton of soybeans because they don't have the transportation to ship out corn. It's just going to be a problem down the road that is going to have to be dealt with anyway. But yeah, this fertilizer is a huge concern for me. Second I walk out the door, I'm going to make phone calls to make sure we got a little bit extra, or try to anyway. Thank you.
Vice Chairman, I would like to add to that. I think an alternative to the edible bean industry is not to grow the crop. There is no plan B, no plan C, no plan D. If we don't have logistics and storage and an edible product that's very specialized, our plan B is black acres, not planting the crop.
It wasn't clear to me what carrier is serving you, or is it a system-wide issue for your area? Is it the short line and BN and CP, or is it one particular carrier that you are being served by?
Oh, I think it's industry-wide.
To add to that, like I had mentioned, with it being a perishable product, it's simply not possible for us to say, well, we'll build bins or do things like that and store it. We don't have the option of running our product through livestock to get it to a human, right? If it becomes dark, if it's not cannibal, things like that, our only option is to sell it for a feed, and we're done. It's game over at that point. So. In our own operation, my operation, we're building additional storage to handle some of this issue, but I don't, without an increase of capacity and service, I can't build enough storage this summer to get ahead of it.
Again, thank you. Your testimony was very informative. I think we certainly understand how serious the situation is for you personally and, frankly, nationally, what the impact could be. And we'll keep talking.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you coming.
Yes. Wherever you want. Thank you.
May I ask again if there are any people who have not checked in yet, any speakers? Please come down now. Thank you.
There's a little bit in there.
All right, why don't we begin with our next panel, panel number 7, and I believe we'll start with Mr. Cantor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Vice Chairman. And indeed, my name is Tom Cantor. I'm the Executive Director of the National Coal Transportation Association, which has approximately 140 corporate members. And we're associated with the production and the consumption of coal, as well as companies that provide services to the transportation of coal, such as car builders, rail car builders, bearing manufacturers, and folks that are casting the wheels, etc. Our primary mission is to educate the membership and the general public and inform our members of various data that they need to have for their operations. We were formed in 1973 because there was something brand new, this is pre-staggers of course, called unit trains. What in the world? And no, it's going into the Powder River Basin, and people had not seen those in any great volume, and they were going to have to purchase rail cars because the railroads, as we all know, were really hurting for capital money, and there was a lot of bankruptcies. Today it seems to be reversed. We just had a coal company file Chapter 11 this week, and we've had in the last couple of months a merchant generator filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. But our members now, as this has grown, control about 80,000 coal cars. The coal producers all throughout the country, and particularly in the Powder River Basin, have capitalized and put into place loadouts, batch weigh systems at about $20 million a piece, and put in loop tracks to help railroads with surge volume that's about a little over a mile to a mile and a half long. And these are necessary capital investments, and our members are happy to do that as long as it continues to improve the system. I would say that primary transportation companies, such as the railroads, barge companies, trucking companies, are not members, but they're important participants in all of our working committees. As a matter of fact, we have 2 working committees meeting later this month at our spring conference in a breakout session, and the railroads will be there as well to inform us, and we'll discuss very many of the items that you see right here. It's almost like you wrote my note here on communications, and we do have good communications, I believe, with the railroad, but there are certain things we'd like to talk about specifically with the railroads that we don't get information on, and I will mention that at the very end of my little presentation. There's stress in the coal delivery system. I don't think there's any surprise there. We don't want to beat it to death. It's been hit all morning. But we did a survey of our own members by email and phone here within the last week and a half. The data will be held in confidence, and it's going to be aggregated for trending. So it's very difficult to give you any specific data. But I will say this, rail performance varies greatly by the railroad and the location. There has been a severe deterioration on the BNSF in terms of cycle time and on-time performance delivery when they say they're going to deliver from the local terminals. Now, this is all information from my membership. I don't have any separate data information to analyze. The CSX has been challenged also by locomotive performance. I heard Cressy a little earlier talk about leasing and about purchasing new locomotives, but we've had a lot of online failures with those locomotives. I think that'll be fixed to be repaired fairly shortly, but as they brought those out of some inventory and storage, it didn't work out quite as well as they thought it would, and they have missed some tonnage for some of our eastern utilities. The Union Pacific has shown some effects of weather and temporary crew dislocations. A lot of that's because of Chicago, which we've heard considerable comment on here in our prior two panels. More stress on the system. We're seeing cycle time increases to the ports. There are some western export coal, but there's also eastern coal. We've seen a little increase in cycle time there, but the truth is I have talked to the coal producers, and I do not know of major vessel demurrage problems. We're seeing some of that, I think, in grain that people have talked about, but I have not seen that so far in coal. And that's not to say there's none. I just don't think that's a major problem immediately. Coal producers are seeing they're seeing reductions in their delivery domestically as well. Again, it's a little bit like real estate. It's location. Where is your mine? What's happening? Some mines are down almost 30 to 40%, which means laying off some employees and certainly taking a look at a mine potential shutdown. That's one extreme case. Utilities, we talked about ground storage, and interesting to me when we had our feedback, it's almost a binomial distribution of ground storage. So it's not a situation where you say everybody over here is 5 days, 10 days, everybody over here is 40 days. It does vary. It does vary on location, and it also depends on where you started into the winter season. I mentioned that we have about 80,000 cars either controlled or owned by our utility members. Equipment utilization is another area that we're concerned about. Train sets have been laid down in some cases, and I think it's been corrected through communications, but earlier on in January and February, trains were laid down, and the utilities did not even know it for about 6 days, 7 days, etc. They weren't informed officially that they were laid down. There is a protocol and a priority that was developed by NCTA several years ago, along with the railroads, for laying down trains, and we may want to revisit that, but we certainly respect the right of the railroads to do what they have to do online and during operation. And then the lack of crew and power are making train sets or car sets owned by the railroads, who put them in normally twice a year into repair shops, but getting them out is something else in terms of getting locomotive power. I do have one utility that actually had 11, I know it's hard to believe, 11 sets in a repair shop that had already had ordered a crew and locomotives to remove them from the repair shop. And by the way, that was not on the BNSF. We think CSX and the UP will return to normal delivery much quicker. There's no major weather dislocation. You've heard about the Chicago things. This is, again, feedback from our utilities and the way they're looking at the systems. However, because of communications with the BNSF and feelings on what will happen, we're not expecting full recovery until the first quarter of 2015. Utilities will continue to manage the coal pile. Not every utility does that, but most are derating their units somewhat so that they can make sure they have coal in this summer for the summer peak. This could be expensive to the ratepayer as natural gas prices have increased and the demand for storage injection of natural gas is quite high. And believe me, almost every coal-producing area at $4.50 for natural gas per MCF is in the money for coal. And you hear a lot about natural gas prices. Okay, so the concerns will be that we're going to be in low inventory during a hot summer demand. The railroads will going to manage your coal piles for you instead of you managing it yourself. Electricity prices will be higher than necessary. Purchase power, of course, will be expensive. What's NCTA like to do? We have formed 2 working task force, and we've talked to both railroad coal or energy departments, that is the BN and the UP. They have agreed to work with us. We want to take a look at the forecasting process, which we can do on the joint line. And that forecasting process, we'd just like to clarify. I think it's good for the railroads. It's good for us. We've got a lot of new folks in the utility business, and sometimes they're told to move their forecast up a month from coal that was missed last month. That may not be what's good for the railroads. It may not be good for slotting in the joint line. And the equipment utilization. What should we be doing here in terms of laying down sets and having maintenance on a regular schedule? And I think we can talk, and that can work out real easily. That is all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cantor. Mr. Atkins?
You already said, my name is Mark Atkins. I'm Vice President of Next Gen Coal Service.
I don't think your mic's on. Thank you.
You were probably better off before. Again, my name is Mark Atkins. I'm Vice President of Next Gen Coal Services and TUCO Inc. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the TUCO part. TUCO is a single-purpose entity. Our purpose is to procure coal, transportation services, and coal handling services for 2 large coal-burning power plants in the Panhandle of Texas. And those 2 plants combined consume about 8 million tons a year. It may be obvious, but I want to say it anyway, that to be of value to the power plants, that fuel supply has to be reliable. Reliable generation is dependent upon reliable fuel, which is in turn dependent upon reliable transportation services. To secure reliable transportation services, TUCO entered into 2 agreements with the Burlington Northern Santa Fe under their Common Carrier Pricing Authority, BNSF 90068, particularly Attachment A, which is entitled a Coal Unit Train Commitment Certificate. These certificates provide for, and I quote, common carrier service for movement of loaded and empty coal unit trains as ordinarily and customarily provided by BNSF for such services. Further, it states that cycle times and schedules may vary from time to time. And as important as any of that is that the minimum volume under these agreements is 100% of the coal shipped to these plants each year. And talking about the common carrier, that brings me to the question for the board. And that's what's required of the BNSF to meet its common carrier obligation. It seems that as we move further and further from staggers, that obligation and how it's defined has become more fuzzy and less clear. But surely their obligation lies somewhere along this line of guaranteed cycle times to, well, we'll move it when we decide we want to move it. Something has to be in there someplace. But anyway, so that's, I'd just like clarification on that. But going back, TUCO and BNS have combined their efforts over the years to move between 8 and 9 million tons of coal a year to these power plants using 10 sets or fewer sets of cars. Each one of these sets is 120 cars, so it's about somewhere between 14,000 and 14,500 tons per train. Over the past 12 months, we've seen a steady month-to-month erosion in cycle times. Cycle times have increased from the start of the period when they were in their 130s to over 170 hours per cycle now. Why do cycle times matter? Well, each 10-hour increase in cycle times we see costs us the ability to deliver 500,000 tons of coal. So if we're at 20 hours over the prior times, that's 1 million tons that aren't going to get delivered at those higher cycle times. And the system is so loaded up with sets, there's not room right now for additional trains or cars to be added. But I'm not here, I didn't come here to vilify the BN. I enjoy my relationship with the BN, but I just did come to make my situation known to the board and maybe make a couple of suggestions. And like everybody else has said here, better communication. And I think the communication has been improving. We still lack some things, as Mr. Cantor kind of mentioned, that we're still getting some sets set down without any notification. We have to kind of find that out when we're tracing them. We see them sitting in the same place for a couple of days. Well, even an old coal miner like me begins to figure out it's probably had the power pulled off of it. So we need to improve on that. Also, was discussed earlier, the BN providing more detailed information. We get service advisories, and those are good. And the last one on April 4th said that, there were 80 fewer trains holding than there had been in the prior period. What I would like to understand is, what is that relative to? Is it 180 or is it 1,080? Because it helps me kind of understand, is my set one of 40 or is it one of 4,000 that's out there holding, that might be parked? That's pretty much, there are several other examples of improvement.
Feel free to continue if you'd like.
Okay. Well, just wrapping it up, everybody has kind of mentioned it as they were going through their presentation. I said, hey, that's one of my bullet points. So, would suggest that the railroads meet with the industry groups as well as individuals. I know that's not their preference, but some individuals, some companies are a little reluctant. My perspective was, hey, I got nothing to lose. I'm losing inventory every day. So, and on March the 5th, Steve Bob took time out of his busy schedule and several of his associates to sit down and meet with us. We both presented our information, and I think both of us came away better informed. And we really appreciate not only that effort, but the communication that we get from the marketing director that takes care of our account. So, anyway, I want to thank the board. I commend you for having this hearing. You've got a difficult task ahead of you because it's going to have to be, as we see it, a delicate balance has to be obtained. That's a balance between what the BN and the CSX and everybody else can do, and try to balance that service among the coal, crude, agriculture, intermodal customer base. So, anyway, that's thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkins.
I don't have specific questions for you, but thank you for the effort that you made to come here and talk with us and inform us sort of what your personal, particularly your personal effort with the railroads and your both frustrations and hope. And also thank you, Mr. Cantor, for giving sort of the broad perspective of the 80 companies that you represent.
Just a quick question. I mean, it's more broad than, but it sounds like the communication with respect to you, Mr. Atkins, has gotten better, and it sounds like it's been pretty good based on your take, Mr. Cantor. Do you see that there are any other opportunities out there as far as running on other Class 1 lines, if there's a congestion problem that are available to some of the coal shippers? I know that it's, and I'm not.
There are some units. I'm sorry. There are some units that have dual service, and that would give them an opportunity if they're both taken from the same mining area.
Mm-hmm.
Varies considerably differently in the east, but in the Powder River Basin, I guess it would be possible. I wouldn't want to get into the whole. Not that many units are that close to terminals, but so that may not be an option there in switching. But there may be some possibilities.
Okay.
But the idea that Mr. Bob talked about in terms of diverting to mines is also not a bad idea. It just depends on the utility and if they can do that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. As the Vice Chairman said, I really do appreciate you coming here, and look forward to seeing you soon, Mr. Cantor. Thank you very much.
Down one. I think they've got three with them. Yeah, well, they have three of them. Yes, ma'am. That's great, thanks.
You switch yours.
Chair's a little bit lower. Switches around.
Okay, why don't we begin with panel 8, and I think we're going to begin with Cure and Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you. Little competitive switching there going on, I guess, with chairs. Thank you, Chairman Elliott and Vice Chairman Bingaman, for scheduling this hearing on rail service issues. I appreciate the expedited hearing to listen to the concerns of shippers and to hear directly from the railroads about service issues. I also commend the STB for sending staff to North Dakota to meet with affected parties on the ground in the states and outside of Washington, D.C. As you mentioned, my name is Paul Gutierrez. I work for the Rural Electric Co-ops, but I appear here today on behalf of Consumers United for Rail Equity, or CURE, of which NRECA is a member. CURE represents over 24 major individual rail shippers and various commodity groups and other large trade associations that represent more than 3,500 electric, utility, chemical, manufacturing, agriculture, and forest and paper companies and their consumers. You have heard numerous entities today that have had similar issues as our CURE members that prompted the meeting. I'll give you an example. Dairyland Power Cooperative has been unable to get rail delivery of coal needed for their generation of electricity. The increased cost of trucking in coal or supplementing their generation with natural gas will ultimately be borne by their consumers. Our utility members are required to keep the lights on, to keep the power flowing, and don't have the luxury of not delivering power. They're required to make contingency plans to keep power flowing. Many other commodity groups, such as agricultural products, chemical products, and paper and forest products, are being similarly affected, as you've heard today. CURE submits that the service problems we're discussing today reflect the impacts of rail market power because of the lack of market competition. It is not a secret that firms holding a lot of market power may not invest in capacity and not respond as they would under normal market conditions. To respond effectively to the harms, CURE believes that the board needs to take into account the broader context in which these harms have arisen. Just a couple of weeks ago, at the public hearing of EP 711, the board heard from railroads and the repeated long-standing claim that they basically don't keep excess capacity to absorb the new traffic that they might obtain from the Net Lease proposal. At that same hearing, you heard from ACC and Escalation Consultants the new study that shows by commodity group the revenue over 180 of RVC threshold the railroads are now collecting. The evidence clearly shows that railroads are now beyond revenue adequate and exercise too much market power over rail-dependent shippers. With the achievement of the revenue adequacy by major railroads, the board now faces a new paradox of how revenue-adequate carriers or group of carriers with access to all the capital they need elect to operate their systems in a way that produces inadequate service in the absence of any type of market competition. We hope that by initiating this hearing and with the pending competitive switching hearing decision that the board will carefully consider competitive access provisions that have not been available in the past. Across the country, CURE members in many different industry sectors experience daily rigors of competition and effective regulation where needed to prevent excessive market control of profits. CURE and its members urge the board to view the current service issues as another symptom of excessive rail market power and to apply competitive access remedies Congress long ago provided for inadequate service. Service problems stemming from market power can't be solved solely by competitive switching, but that's a good place to start. The current state of rail consolidation and lack of competition is only upping the ante for poor rail performance. The board can guide the rail industry to make decisions to operate their systems in ways that are less myopic and more consistent with sound rail transportation and effective competition. We would ask that you seek ways to increase competition, look favorably on the competitive switching EP 711, require emergency orders for rail delivery of coal and commodities as necessary, require carriers to make available data service disruptions and plans to address those delays, require plans to address long-term growth and reliable rail service, and when to require emergency and contingency plans to plan for the next worst winter on record. Thank you for the opportunity to present here today.
Thank you.
There we go. I think that's on. Chairman Elliott, Vice Chairman Begeman, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Chris Blally. I'm here on behalf of Growth Energy. Growth Energy is an association of 83 ethanol producers, 82 associate members, and thousands of ethanol supporters across the country. We promote expanding the use of ethanol in gasoline, decreasing our dependence on foreign oil, improving our environment, and creating American jobs. Ethanol is a homegrown renewable fuel that provides significant benefits to our nation's transportation system. Today, we represent nearly 10% of our nation's transportation fuel supply and are poised to grow even more. In 2013, the ethanol industry produced over 13 billion gallons of renewable fuel, and over 60% of it was transported by rail. As you may have seen in the last few weeks, there's been a great deal of attention on the recent tightening supply and related price spikes for ethanol in certain markets. Make no mistakes, these price spikes have not been caused by a lack of ethanol production or supply, but purely because of an inability to get timely rail transportation. There have been numerous examples of our producers having to wait on trains to deliver their product. In fact, many plants have reduced or even halted production because their storage capacity is fully utilized. In examining the situation just last week, the EIA stated that logistical constraints in and around ethanol production centers in the Midwest, mainly involving railroads on which approximately 70% of ethanol is shipped, appear to be a key factor driving recent prices. Ethanol stocks were drawn down nationwide by nearly 2 million barrels from mid-February to mid-March. This is more than 4 million barrels below typical March levels. East Coast inventories were especially hard hit and on March 14th reached their lowest level since EIA began recording data nearly 4 years ago. In a related story on ethanol exports, the Oil Price Information Service reported U.S. ethanol exports in February were down 21.9% versus January, and rail congestion that delayed delivery of ethanol volumes to U.S. ports most likely played a part in the drop. On top of the poor and declining rail service, our industry has seen increased tariff rates on certain routes, some taking effect as recently as April 1st. Not only did one railroad give our producers very little notice of the increases, but I dare say few, if any, industries would have the ability to increase shipping rates while their service has been so poor. The bottom line is that the railroad industry is not meeting its obligation to transport goods in a timely and effective manner. This failure in service has had a ripple effect on American consumers by increasing the cost of goods and services. It has directly impacted our industry by causing a de facto shutdown in production as there's simply no more space to store product. For our industry and many others that are captive to the nation's railroads to efficiently transport their products, we hope the rail industry will take steps to immediately improve its service record and take this situation as a wake-up call that they need to make the necessary infrastructure investments to fulfill their obligations as a common carrier. Recent ethanol price spikes and reduced production are a direct result of this lack of service. The lack of service is unacceptable and the rail industry must do better. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today and happy to provide additional information as necessary.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hubbard?
Chairman Elliott, Vice Chairman Begeman, good afternoon. My name is Ed Hubbard. I'm the General Counsel for the Renewable Fuels Association. We're the oldest and largest ethanol trade association in the United States and represent the U.S. ethanol industry from issues from seed to tailpipe. On behalf of our membership, I want to thank the members of the Surface Transportation Board for holding this important and timely hearing. The recent crisis of congestion that has seemingly overtaken the rail industry has become a huge and costly problem for shippers of all commodities, including the U.S. ethanol industry. This crisis is one that is causing significant harm to the economic health and well-being of our nation's economy, as well as driving up costs for a wide array of commodities that rely on rail for transportation. As many of you are aware, ethanol has become a critically important component of the U.S. motor fuel market. Today, 96% of all gasoline sold in the United States is blended with at least 10% ethanol. This ethanol is blended with our motor fuel supply as an octane enhancer to improve vehicle performance, as well as an oxygenate to reduce carbon emissions and other dangerous particulates. Given the consistent price competitiveness of U.S. ethanol over petroleum-based gasoline, the blending of ethanol and gasoline has also become a valuable economic benefit for American motorists. With crude oil prices hovering around $90 per barrel, the blending of ethanol as an additive in gasoline has resulted in savings to the American consumer of between 50 cents to $1.50 per gallon. However, over the past few months, mass congestion on the rails has denied consumers this cost-effective option. Due to an uncharacteristic winter, rail shipments of all commodities have been significantly delayed across the country. For ethanol, this congestion has led to a dramatic delay in ethanol shipments to fuel terminals and caused shutdowns of operations at ethanol plants because they can't continue to store product while awaiting rail carriers to move their product. I have one slide that I'd like to show here. This slide indicates it's a different map.
No, it's not that one.
Not that one. Am I reading it? I don't see it in there. And if so, I can work without it. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Thank you. This graph essentially shows train speeds as well as dwell times, but on an average basis, showing that in comparison with last year, it's a 12%, roughly a 12% slower rate at speed in late February, and then while dwell times have been improving somewhat, and they're still 25% above normal on the average. But I think it's important to note that this is just an average. When you look at rail lines such as BNSF and other ones like CSX, we are seeing double and triple the dwell times at terminals. While we understand and appreciate that this was an unusually powerful winter season, it seems unreasonable to conclude that winter weather alone was the cause of such a significant congestion crisis on the rails. Winter comes every year, and rail operators, especially those in northern parts of the country, have had a long history of and experience in adequately preparing themselves for extreme cold, snow, and icy conditions. In fact, in many northern regions of the country, the extreme snow and icy conditions experienced this year are the norm rather than the exception. This begs the question, why is the rail industry having so much difficulty in responding to this year's winter season? What the data tells us that is different about this year as opposed to the countless other winter seasons is the recent dramatic and explosive growth in railcar shipments of Bakken and Canadian crude oil. As reflected, if we could, I'm sorry, thank you. Do that myself. As reflected in this graph showing the growth of crude oil, you've had a significant growth in the last 2 years. While rail shipments of ethanol have stabilized over the last 4 years, crude oil shipments have grown dramatically, growing from less than 70,000 carloads in 2011 to more than 420,000 carloads in 2013. The growth in crude oil shipments has reshuffled the existing fleet of rail cars and locomotives, pressured lease rates, changed normal rail traffic patterns, and generally exerted significant stress on the rail system. And with this congestion crisis, it is becoming more and more apparent that surging crude oil shipments are coming at the expense of other goods and commodities like ethanol. The U.S. ethanol industry has long relied on the railroads for delivering its product to market, as well as receiving necessary inputs for processing its fuel and other co-products. In fact, trains have historically served as an economical and efficient virtual pipeline for ethanol, safely moving our product from plants concentrated in the Midwest to population centers on both coasts. Therefore, we believe it's critical for our nation's rail operators to work quickly to resolve this situation. Moreover, in addressing this situation, the rail operators must respond in a way that treats the vast array of other goods and commodities competing with crude oil on the rails fairly and equitably. As a supplement to my testimony today, I'd also like to submit a copy of a recent letter on this very subject from RFA President Bob Deneen to Ed Hamburger, the President and CEO of the Association of American Railroads. Once again, I thank you for the opportunity to voice our industry's concern on this important issue, and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hubbard.
Good afternoon, Chairman Elliott, Vice Chair Begeman. I am Kai Reitz, Commercial Manager at Northern Tier Energy, an independent downstream energy company with refining, retail, and pipeline operations, but primarily consists of an oil refinery in St. Paul Park, Minnesota, referred to here as SPPR. I'm joined here today by Jason Akey, who has served as Commercial Operations Manager the last 3 years. I'm also joined by Charles H. Banks, President of RL Banks & Associates, an independent railroad consulting firm. To begin, some brief background. We are one of only 2 refineries in Minnesota and one of 4 refineries in the Upper Great Plains. In addition to various physical logistic assets, Northern Tier Energy also operates and supplies fuels to 163 convenience stores and 73 franchise stores. So let me move directly into how CP has historically served the St. Paul Park refinery. There is a slide of a map.
We'd like to bring you some, since it's very detailed, we'd like to just bring you some.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll see a little bit better on it.
CP is supposed to provide switching services once a day, 7 days a week from its St. Paul yard facility, depicted as number 1 on the map, to the refinery, depicted as number 2. The distance between the CP yard and the refinery is only 8 miles, down an industrial lead which directly accesses CP's yard without crossing any other rail line, so rail access has been convenient and efficient for both parties. The refinery's ability to maintain stable production levels is dependent on steady, predictable deliveries from CP. Now we'll discuss what service looks like today. But I do want to just mention that our issues are not with long-haul service or routing, but focuses on local operations or the last mile of service. But I do believe what we're hearing here today has accounted for some of the challenges we face. Beginning in late 2013, CP switching steadily declined from 7 days a week to a sporadic and irregular event to an average of almost 6 failures a week over a 10-week span. And I do have some accompanying calendars. The accompanying calendars provide a graphic demonstration of the extent of CP service failures in the last 3 months. A failure being defined as a missed switch or a failure to pick up and deliver specifically ordered cars. In March,
Next slide, please. Next one up.
March, please. Thank you. Thank you. In March, only 9 days transpired without service failure. The most frustrating aspect of the recent degradation of CP switching is breakdown in communications. Of the 57 service failures recorded by SPPR and reported to CP via email, 27 elicited no response whatsoever. What limited responses SPPR did receive were often vague and occasionally not factual in nature. The simple fact is we can no longer trust CP to deliver carloads on time or to produce realistic solutions to past service failures. It goes without saying that these have had a severe adverse effect on the refinery. There are several byproducts of the refining process which require rateable and regular rail service. In recent months, service failures have resulted in a total approximate loss in revenues of $1.3 million, approximately 110,000 barrels of lost fuel production, or approximately 225,500 full tanks of gas to the Minnesota area. Since some of the products we produce may not be familiar to everyone, I would like to just take a moment to highlight some of the ways in which our refinery is tied to the local community. SPPR's primary focus is taking crude oil and refining it into gasoline used in our cars and diesel fuel, which is used to fuel trucks, buses, locomotive engines, including CPs in the Twin Cities, and farming equipment. SPPR also produces jet fuel, which supplies all the major carriers at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. Some others are asphalt, used in road repairs, propane, used in heating your home, your outdoor grill, and also its main use in the fall, drying the crops, and sulfur, used mainly in the fertilizer market. So not only, I am almost done.
Yeah, take your time.
So not only does the refinery provide fuels to the local market and support hundreds of retail gas stations, we are also closely tied to a number of other industries. Northern Tier is not asking the STB to force an unwilling industry on an unwilling industry a revolutionary shift in the way CP operates, nor are we asking the board to introduce competition where there is none today. What I am seeking specifically at a minimum is increased communication from CP, an increase in both the quality and quantity of communication, both from the local and corporate level, which hopefully will resolve our fears that the complete absence of communication in recent past has not been indicative of the fact that CP had no plans or intentions to make operational changes which might restore service. We need transparency into what operational changes are being evaluated and implemented in the coming weeks and months so that we not only can interpret what we are experiencing, but also give us a timeline and foundation on which to make our own future operational decisions. I did hear you ask the BNNCP to increase communication on all levels, and I was pleased to hear their affirmation. And it is my sincere hope this comes to fruition. But I would add, most importantly, we also expect a system of accountability. This is the most important aspect, and something which we hope this board will do. We're demanding this in the interests of our employees, our customers, our suppliers, our business associates, our equity partners and shareholders, the Minnesota area consumers, and in the vernacular of a railroad, our operating ratio. Chairman Elliott, Vice Chair Begeman, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could you just repeat for me the number of times you tried to reach CP to which they did not respond to you?
57 and 27.
In the first quarter?
In the first quarter. We only began keeping a failure log as of January 28th. Typically, we do see peaks and valleys in service, but they often regulate after a time. And that is what we remained hopeful and patient for. It did not happen, so in late January we started a detailed record and then kept an email trail of our notifications. And as I mentioned, 27 of those notifications elicited zero response. No phone call, no email, nothing.
We'd be happy to share our log with you.
And if you'd like, we'd be happy to share that log with you.
Thank you. I commend you for that for communication being your ask today. And although Mr. Creel, I don't see him here anymore, I know that members of his organization are here, and I'm sure that they will work to meet your request. And I just want to thank the rest of the panel. We certainly have gotten your messages, and we appreciate your effort to be here.
Yeah, as well, I'd like to thank everyone here. CP did make a commitment to communicate well with its shippers, so we will hold them to that, and I assume you'll hear from them soon. Thank you, the rest of you, also for appearing before us today. Your information was very helpful, and you're free to go. Thank you. We're going to hold off on bringing the other panel up at this moment. I believe Senator Thune is within a minute or two away and appears to be has a vote he has to run off to right after this. good timing.
Famous, okay.
Feel free to start,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I do appreciate you, Mr. Chairman, and Vice Chairman Begeman holding today's hearing, and also the importance of focusing a light on this issue. It's very important to my state and to a lot of other folks who are here. So we appreciate your taking a look at the options that might be available to improve service to South Dakota and other areas that are experiencing similar type difficulties. Today's hearing, I think, as you've seen in the overall number of speakers, underscores the degree to which rail service and supply problems can have an impact on small businesses, both large and small. And I appreciate the opportunity that you've extended me to allow me to speak with you about this issue, as well as that you've extended to the South Dakota Secretary of Agriculture, Lucas Lynch, Midwest Cooperative General Manager Milt Hancock, South Dakota Farmer and Producer Dennis Jones, South Dakota Farmer Dwayne Boss, who is here today on behalf of the South Dakota Farmers Union, and South Dakota Wheat Growers Board President Hal Clemenson. Given your roles at the STB, you both hear frequently about how important reliable rail service is to so many in our nation. When the U.S. rail system is operating without impediments, there's no question that it is the preferred option to move large amounts of goods in a safe and a timely manner. As Vice Chairman Begeman knows, as a native South Dakotan, our home state is no different when it comes to the critical importance that railroads have, especially for our state's agricultural sector. As the former South Dakota Rail Director, I understand that our farmers, ethanol producers, and other small businesses rely on rail service from Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad and from Canadian Pacific Railway, not only to get their products to domestic and international markets, but also for inputs that are critical to their businesses. Unfortunately, the disruptions in rail service that they've experienced this winter have had a very real impact, not only on short-term operations, but also on their planning for the remainder of the year when it comes to making business decisions. For example, Redfield Energy, located in Redfield, South Dakota, is a 55 million gallon per year ethanol producer served by BNSF. Its ethanol plant processes approximately 20 million bushels of corn a year, which in addition to producing ethanol, also produce 233,000 tons of distiller's grain that Redfield sells mostly to feed to local cattle producers. To move its ethanol to market, it leases 200 rail tanker cars and typically expects rail turns on these tankers to take approximately 4 weeks. At normal production levels, it would fill 40 rail tanker cars per week. Well, beginning in mid-December, when Redfield Energy originally reached out to me regarding its service issues, it had been experiencing rail turns averaging up to 6 weeks, and in one instance, it took 8 weeks to complete a turn. When the tank cars are not returned on time and the ones on hand are full, Redfield has few other storage options and is forced to slow the plant's production. Now, you may ask why shutting down altogether is not a viable option. Well, not only is a complete shutdown inefficient, but it can also jeopardize the entire plant when temperatures are at or below freezing, a common occurrence this winter where pipes can freeze and explode. To prevent this worst-case scenario, Redfield has been forced to run its plant at 60 to 90% all winter and has no plans to run at full speed anytime soon due to continued delays and uncertainty with rail service. Redfield has also been forced to purchase distiller's grain at spot market prices, which are higher than market prices, in order to meet obligations. When this happens, there's this cascading impact on other parts of the ethanol plant's operation, including the inability to pre-sell ethanol or distiller's grain to customers because of the uncertainty of the plant's speed or its ability to transport the product to the market. Rail service has become so uncertain that Redfield Energy has decided to more than double its on-site ethanol storage capacity before next winter, which will provide it an additional 10 or 11 days of operating ability to protect against plant shutdowns due to delays with rail car delivery in the future. Redfield Energy has also relayed how poor rail service has led to other problems for those with whom it does business. For example, Redfield has not been able to provide all of its cattle producers with the amount of distiller's grain that producers typically rely upon. It's also led to a wider corn basis. While this may be good for Redfield in the short term because the company receives an essential input for its business at a lower cost, it is seriously impacting agricultural producers who themselves have been faced with rail service issues. For example, North Central Farmers Elevator, located in Ipswich, South Dakota, is a farmer-owned cooperative that serves over 2,500 producer members in North and Central South Dakota. Its Ipswich grain elevator placed a rail car order with Canadian Pacific on January 24, 2014, for hopeful delivery to its facility on January 27th. The cars arrived on March 17th, 7 weeks late. This late delivery was made even more frustrating by poor communication from Canadian Pacific, which failed to respond to inquiries about when the cars would arrive. The elevator in Ipswich faced significant economic hardships by these rail delays. When the January 27th cars did not arrive, the grain inventory at the facility reached capacity. In order to meet other outstanding contracts, it had to move that grain by truck to another railroad loading facility. So between January 27th and March 17th, it moved over 300,000 bushels of grain at a cost of 18 cents a bushel, or $54,000 in additional unplanned transportation expenses. Once at this new facility, it found the cost of rail service had also increased due to scarcity, with a typical grain shuttle running $6,000 over tariff. These two unexpected costs equate to an additional $1.78 per bushel in unexpected expenses being paid not by the eventual purchaser, but by the farmers and the elevator owners. Another grain elevator, Dakota Mill and Grain, headquartered in Rapid City with a total of 7 rail facilities serving 500 customers, calculated the cost of poor rail service another way. If the poor rail service lasts for 6 months, and during that time producers see grain prices drop by 10% and agricultural inputs like feed and fertilizer increase by 10%, something that they're expecting, it will cost its customers approximately $3.5 million. To make matters worse, this loss will be hitting agricultural producers in the spring, the exact time we're usually dependent on grain sales to finance their work. Elevators located off the rail lines owned by BNSF and CP, such as the rail lines owned by Twin Cities and Western Railroad Company, a short line operating the Sisseton Millbank rail lines, might be in the worst shape of all. Instead of having to wait long periods of time for car orders, they've been told that they cannot even place any new car orders until August due to congestion on the main rail lines. Between now and then, they can just be added to a wait list, and cars will be delivered as available. While a concern for many on the rail line, it will become critical for border states Co-op in Wilmot, South Dakota, if this is not resolved before the end of summer. In August, it starts to receive wheat from local producers, with soybeans arriving in September. At its facility, however, both grains are kept in the same storage bin. This means that border states is unable to move all of the wheat as purchased by rail car before the soybean harvest begins. The soybean producers will have no place to sell or store their product. Border states is asked to be added to the rail car wait list for August, but at this point there's no guarantee it'll receive a single rail car in time to move wheat before soybeans. So as you can tell by these few examples and the other testimony that you've heard today, the rail service constraints being faced by South Dakota shippers are having a huge impact on a wide cross-section of producers and shippers in our state and region. They also have an impact on the future economic health of South Dakota and our number one industry, which is agriculture. As transportation costs increase, the basis for farmers selling grain is growing larger and larger, which is taking money directly out of farmers' pockets. What this means for South Dakota is a direct transfer of wealth away from the state, which not only negatively impacts agricultural producers, grain handlers, and the ethanol industry, but it also impacts other Main Street businesses that rely on equitable prices for South Dakota agricultural products. It is imperative that we find a solution to these very real service problems. I've appreciated the meetings and the calls that BNSF and CP have had with me and my staff about this issue over the past few months, and particularly the steps that BNSF has taken to hire new employees, acquire additional equipment, and invest in necessary maintenance and improvements. I encourage both railroads to double down on these efforts. Additionally, when rail service begins to improve, I would also encourage both railroads to plan for the future needs of rail shippers in our region, especially in light of the projected growth of crude oil transport in the Bakken and increased demand for coal, to ensure that all rail shippers receive adequate and efficient rail service. Finally, I would ask that the Surface Transportation Board approve the pending sale of Canadian Pacific's rail line in South Dakota to Genesee and Wyoming as soon as possible. While this will not solve South Dakota's rail service issue, it will bring certainty to the shippers located on the 660 miles of DM&E line and allow the new owner to begin service as soon as possible. So I want to thank you again, Chairman Elliott and Vice Chairman Begeman, for holding this hearing today and for allowing me to testify. and I appreciate the attention that you are providing to this matter. And I look forward to working with you as it relates to other items that the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee is working on. But I would just close by saying that we have a problem, a serious problem that's affecting the economy all across South Dakota, and it needs to be fixed. And I hope that you will work with us to make that possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Anything else? Okay. Okay, we'll now bring up the final panel. And thank you very much to this panel for its patience.
We know you've been here since 8:30 too, so thank you.
Okay, why don't we begin panel 9, and we will begin with Ms. Burns. Thank you.
Thank you. Occidental Chemical Corporation, or Oxy, is a leading manufacturer of chemicals which are the building blocks for a range of products essential to public health and modern life. Oxy employs approximately 4,000 employees and contractors at 22 locations. Our products, which are used in water purification, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, agricultural chemicals, and de-icing applications, are vital to the United States economy. Before I begin, Oxy fully recognizes that this has been a brutal winter. Regardless of the challenges we have been given by Mother Nature, service levels have been unacceptable. Although our total network has seen disruptions in service due to the severe winter conditions, the plant that has been the most impacted has been our facility located in Taft, Louisiana. This plant produces potassium hydroxide, otherwise known as KOH, which is used in de-icing materials, pharmaceuticals, food applications, and fertilizers. Our operations require a constant, consistent flow of raw materials, and service variability makes it nearly impossible to run our operation efficiently. Our major raw material is potassium chloride, otherwise known as KCl. Oxy buys 100% of our supply from Mosaic's mine located in Belle Plaine, Saskatchewan. Mosaic is served by the Canadian National and the Canadian Pacific. However, freight is limited on the CN due to weight limitations, and the CN track would need to be upgraded before it could be considered an alternative. Therefore, all of our KCl is transported by CP. The cars interchange in Chicago with the UP for delivery into our Taft, Louisiana facility. Since December 1st, we have officially opened 29 shutdown logs for our KCl movements. We have reduced operating rates 6 times in an attempt to prevent shutdowns. These reduced rates have cost Oxy close to $7 million. Normal transit times from Belle Plaine, Saskatchewan to Proviso, Illinois are typically 6 to 7 days. Average transit times since December have been 11 to 13 days. We have had instances where our loaded cars have sat idled for up to 8 days, apparently waiting for power or crews. Over the past several months, CP has added approximately 150 cars into Oxy service. Even with the addition of cars, we are hand-to-mouth with little to no safety stock. At the same time that the number of cars in service increased, we started experiencing a higher number of bad-ordered cars or rail cars undergoing repairs. We have also seen significant delays in bad-ordered cars returning to service. Most of these cars should turn around within 48 hours. Our current average is closer to 8 days. To address our recent problems with transit times, the UP and CP agreed to test the Kansas City interchange. The trip plan from Belle Plaine to Kansas City is estimated to be 9 days. Our cars were loaded at the mine on April 2nd. As of yesterday, our cars were still in Brandon, Manitoba. 7 days after our cars were loaded, the cars had only transited 250 miles. This gives us little confidence in this interchange point and leads us to believe that the issues we are seeing are due to CP operation plans and not the interchange point of Chicago. The CP's inability to execute agreed-to corrective actions is adding to our frustration. Even when new plans to address prior service issues have been agreed to, the CP often doesn't execute to the plan. This impacts all the other parties in the supply chain. For example, on February 21st, the CP committed to expedite a 38-car block to avoid a shutdown situation. Specific departure and arrival times were projected, and Oxy and UP aligned operations accordingly. However, the UP didn't move the cars until 2 days later, which made our plans obsolete and further added to our inefficiencies. On the brighter side, UP has performed admirably. Time and time again, they have stood ready to receive cars from the CP, only to receive no cars or fewer cars than expected. They have done an outstanding job communicating, reworking plans, expediting movements, putting together special trains, creating extra switches, and building unit trains. They have helped us avoid a shutdown at our Taft plant on numerous occasions. Our thanks to the entire UP team. As mentioned earlier, we have experienced problems with other railroads during this time period. Shutdown tickets were opened at 2 of our northern plants, and we have experienced interruptions in service which affected our plant and customer operations. Both of these instances were short-lived, the railroads were responsive, and we have seen improvements at these facilities. Since today's hearing is also focused on BNSF, I would like to mention that we have had increases in transit times at our Wichita, Kansas location. However, they have been manageable. In addition, BNSF has done a very good job communicating their recovery plans. Instead of complaining to the board, we would like to make suggestions for improvement and be a part of those solutions. Possible actions include continuing to explore the use of unit trains to rebuild our inventory to minimum levels. Unit trains could allow us to quickly rebuild our safety stock. On one occasion, CP has allowed UP to come into the Bensonville yard and pull Oxy cars. We'd like to know if this practice can continue, or can the UP go further north to pick up the cars until we see some improvement in CP transit times. Things we need from the CP. CP operations personnel appear to be focused on specific geographic areas. We request one senior level operations person at the CP to work with us across the entire pipeline as we work through these issues. We need proactive planning. We need an overall plan, and when things are missed, we want to hear the recovery plan rather than discovering the miss on our own. CP needs to execute the plan. On multiple occasions, they have communicated a plan, and the plan is not executed. CP needs to better communicate their recovery plans. Other railroads are sending out updates, but we are not seeing this from the CP. As we unwind from these service issues, we need to determine how and why we got here. What can be done differently? What are the contingency plans for emergency situations? What interchanges can be tested and agreed upon before they are needed on a large-scale basis? We're grateful for the opportunity to comment during today's hearing. We are very appreciative of all the assistance that we have received from the rail customer and public assistant groups. Lucy and her group have been fantastic. We're anxious for an immediate solution to our problems, but equally interested in ensuring that plans are in place to prevent issues such as this in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Clark?
Hi. I'm Gretchen Clark. I'm with New Page Corporation. Thank you very much for the opportunity for us to come and state our case today. I'm the Director of Procurement for Transportation and Warehousing at New Page Corporation. New Page is the largest coated paper manufacturer in North America. I have responsibility for all railroad activities and service throughout our organization in our multiple locations. We have 8 mills and 2 distribution centers. 5 of our mills are on CN, as well as 1 distribution center. And I've provided a deck for you to reference. On slide 3, it shows New Page footprint, and we have 3 mills on CN in Wisconsin, 1 mill in Michigan, and 1 mill in Kentucky. And our DC is in Chicago. Previously, they were on the EJ&E, which is now owned by CN. We also have 1 mill on the BNSF that's in Duluth, Minnesota. If you move to slide 4, we currently have shutdown notice with CN for our Wisconsin mills. That's 3 mills that we rely on them to move loggers, as they reference them, through the lake states. And we need a minimum of 210 cars. We did give notice to our shutdown on February 25th. And unfortunately, when we gave notice, actually our service diminished greatly. If you see the red line on the graph there, went below even the average of 155 cars a week. We have seen significant improvement, though, I would like to say, within just the last 2 weeks, which happened to be when we gave notice that we were talking to the STB. So we do have some cars that have been pulled out of storage, and we are awaiting another 90 cars to come out of storage. However, tomorrow we will be hitting one of our lowest days on-hand inventory of hardwood, which will be 2.5 days that supports all 3 mills. On the next page, you'll see what our requirement is versus, how many we order versus what is spotted. We are ordering around 275 cars on average a week. We are allocated around 150. And as I said, we gave official notice to CN on February 25th for all of our Wisconsin mills to shut down by April 27th if the continued service remained at that level. And as mentioned, unfortunately, it got worse, and now we're looking at an April 17th shutdown date for all 3 mills. I'd like to go ahead and move on to the next slide, 6, which actually discusses our Chicago Heights Distribution Center. We are supposed to be getting 6 switches a week, and what we have been experiencing is 6 switches for January. We had 3 switches in February, and in March we received 6 switches. So I was able to speak with Mr. Leopold when he was here, and he's going to be looking into that situation for us. So we have been suffering service on the last mile greatly with CN, previously on the J. Next is our Duluth mill in Minnesota. We have greatly been impacted by our car supply. We use the 50-foot box cars, lack of car supply, and also an issue with high percentage of rejects in that fleet. We are running at around 20% of rejected placed empties that they give us. They have gone the extra mile and put in a reinspection track where they are actually rejecting approximately 50% of their own fleet prior to it getting to us. So our mill is actually a 90% rail mill, and because of the lack of car supply as well as the bad order issue, we are now down to 50% on our rail out of that mill. And so we're very dependent on rail at all of our locations. We are captive shippers. So due to the lack of the car supply, transit times doubling or even tripling, if you have to go through BNSF's Northtown or Chicago, or we need hardwood in the Lake States, and if you happen to fall into the black abyss of a bad ordered rail car, NewPage has had to remake paper and ship paper on truck to the open spot market, purchase additional pulp on the open market, and call for emergency inbound material via truck. It has cost NewPage millions and millions of dollars, upwards of $20 million. So our communication has been good with the railroads. We just need them to act on what they say they're going to do, really. But the communication with BNSF and CN has been good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity for us to speak.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Vice Chairman. I want to start off by thanking you for holding this hearing today. Please note all of my comments today are respectfully submitted. My name is Adam Manna, and I am the General Counsel at Northdown Industries, Inc., which operates through its sister corporation, America, Inc., for all businesses occurring in Canada, our head office being in Toronto, Canada. We are the leading manufacturers and suppliers of various pet products, including our primary product, cat litter. We are the largest private label cat litter manufacturer in all of North America. We have 4 manufacturing facilities in North America, which are located in Brantford, Ontario, Lethbridge, Alberta, Dyersburg, Tennessee, and Glendale, Arizona. Today I'm here to discuss our struggles with the shipment of sodium bentonite. The primary raw material in clumping cat litter is sodium bentonite, which is mined and processed by our vendors in Wyoming. Sodium bentonite is then shipped by a rail car through BNSF, CP, and CN to all of our facilities. In particular, BNSF services all of our facilities, while CP also services our Brantford and Lethbridge facilities. Both CP and BNSF hold captive locations on the routes from our vendor's location in Bentonite, Wyoming, to all of our facilities. The services we have received from CP and BNSF have been highly unsatisfactory. I'll start with CP. My company spends approximately $7 million annually on CP freight rail services. And I will address some of the major issues and problems we've been experiencing. First is delaying or failing to provide sufficient rail cars to our vendor, causing shortages of clay. For instance, in December 2013 to February 2014, CP provided us with only 171 rail cars out of 404 rail cars ordered. This is less than a 50% fill rate. Continuously departing markedly from its own estimated timelines. For instance, deliveries to our Brantford facility range anywhere from 9 days to 35 days. Deliveries shipped to our Lethbridge facility range anywhere from 7 days to 32 days. Even though CP attributes these delays to BNSF, the fact remains that even when the cars arrive in Lethbridge, they're regularly held for an extra 2 to 4 days for what is construed as processing times. Third is failing to provide timely and accurate updates to estimated times of arrivals. Fourth is bunching. When rail cars do finally arrive, they all arrive bunched. We do not have the labor capacity to handle these arrivals at once. We place our orders with plenty of lead times and space them out. Nonetheless, all the cars, when they do arrive at once. Some of the consequences that we have to incur for these problems are as follows. It's been talked about today, but one of the primary issues for us is demurrage. In the past year, we incurred demurrage charges amounting to approximately $83,000 owing to CP's failure to meet its estimated timelines. In fact, Numerica has received demurrage fees from CP, BNSF, and CN totaling over $500,000 in the year 2013 alone. Additional labor costs. It's virtually impossible to plan logistics, resulting in inefficient use and utilization of our resources, most notably idle labor and plant shutdowns. The trickle-down effect unfortunately goes to our employees, who often get told that they don't need to show up for work and are unable to bring a paycheck home to their families. Third is the additional freight costs. We are forced to redirect our orders from our other facilities, which over the past year alone out of our Lethbridge plant has cost us over $300,000. And last but not least, and a very important point to us, is contractual penalties from our own customers. Due to shortages of clay in our facilities, we've had to pay sales contract penalties to customers for our delays or failures to meet our contractual production commitments. In 2013 alone, these penalties amounted to over $1.5 million, none of which we're able to recoup from the rail companies. These costs are solely attributed to Numerica's inability or failures to meet our contractual production commitments. Now I'll move quickly over to the issues we're experiencing with BNSF, many of which are the same which I just discussed with CP. At BNSF, we spend approximately $10.2 million annually on freight rail services. Problems that we are experiencing are failure or delay providing sufficient rail cars to our vendor, causing shortages, continuously departing markedly from their estimated timelines. Deliveries shipped to our Dyersburg facility range anywhere from 9 to 29 days. And for our Arizona Glendale facility, which BNSF is the sole rail service provider, 90% of all rail cars shipped arrive outside of their own trip plan. And of course, third is bunching. Again, when the rail cars do arrive, they're all bunched. As previously mentioned today, it doesn't matter how much notice we provide or how much time and effort we put in or resources in trying to figure out a proper ordering plan or pattern. When the cars arrive, they arrive bunched. I just have a couple more minutes, that's okay. And the consequences to the issues are the same as before. Demurrage, additional labor costs, contractual penalties from our customers, being forced to ship products from our other facilities, shutting down our plants in its entirety, all of which is adding up to millions of dollars. A common theme for us at our office is devoting numerous amounts of time and resources to the rails. It's not good enough that we have full-time support staff specifically devoted to dealing with the railways. Now our entire management team, from our CEO down to myself as general counsel, must deal with the rail issues on a daily basis. Moving to our recent correspondence, as I know an issue today has been communication. We have repeatedly vocalized these service issues with both BNSF and CP, but their responses are always the same. It's either the fault of the other railway carrier, and if no other railway carrier is involved, then it's the weather's fault. Specifically in February 2014, we sent a letter to CP summarizing all of these service issues and their impact on our business. The response we received from CP was less than satisfactory, as it placed blame on the weather and, of course, sometimes BNSF, not to mention congestion issues, which they bring up in Chicago Terminal. In closing, the problem is that neither CP or BNSF is willing to take any concrete steps to truly help us out. For instance, even though both CP and BNSF agree that service levels have suffered in the past quarter, neither company is willing to hold themselves fiscally accountable. For instance, this is the third year in a row that America has received a price increase from CP of 5% to our Brantford facility and 6% to our Lethbridge facility. In short, price increases are imposed on us regardless of the service levels that we've been provided with. In what other industry is this possible? We cannot realistically impose these fees on our customers despite unsatisfactory service levels. The railway company shouldn't be allowed to do this to us either. Based on the points that we've addressed today, it's just really unreasonable. On top of all this, as a Canadian corporation, we're forced to pay all of our fees in U.S. dollars, coupled with the new exchange rate. All of these charges are really hitting us financially. The poor service levels we received have been so detrimental to our business that valuable customers repeatedly threaten to take their business away from us and has caused a huge strain in our business relationships. Again, I appreciate that we don't ship coal or oil or grain, but our customers are some of the biggest retailers in North America and the United States. We ship to the Costco's, the Sam's, the Walmarts, and the Loblaws of the world. They don't accept our excuses, and they still impose heavy fines on us when we can't ship them their product. We're here today because our corporate existence is at stake, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you today. Again, we appreciate where BNSF and CP are coming from, but in today's world, actions do speak louder than words. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Manna. Mr. Burkett?
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Chairman Elliott, Vice Chairman Begeman. My name is Jeff Burkett. I'm the Global Supply Chain Manager for Amcol International Corporation. We're a publicly traded company with an annual revenue of approximately $1 billion. Amcol is a major producer of bentonite, which is an ore composed of a clay mineral formed from volcanic ash. Bentonite is used in hundreds of ways, from waterproofing to the production of brake rotors. Much of the bentonite that we produce ultimately winds up being used in rotors for a substantial percentage of the automobile manufacturing in the United States. Accordingly, rail service delays in the movement of our product can have downstream impacts on a broader segment of the United States economy. Our two major bentonite production facilities are located in Wyoming. We produce a total of 2 million tons of bentonite each year at those two facilities alone. Given the large volumes and distance involved, we depend upon the availability of rail service to move our product. Canadian Pacific is the only rail carrier capable of servicing our Colony, Wyoming facility. BNSF is the only rail carrier capable of serving our Lovell, Wyoming facility. We spend in excess of $40 million annually on CP rail service for our bentonite traffic. Notably, the CP line that we use is the same line that CP recently agreed to sell to the Genesee in Wyoming. Since the January to February time period this year, the quality of the CP and BNSF rail transportation from our two Wyoming plants has suffered tremendously. This service has impacted Amcol directly and severely. We have incurred substantial costs for truck service where rail service was unavailable. We have incurred significant overtime costs for employees dealing with the repercussions of poor railroad service. We have incurred meaningful and potential lasting harm to our reputation as a business, and we have lost large volumes of sales because of the inability to move our product to market. In addition, our customers, including the Tier 1 suppliers to the U.S. automotive industry, have experienced many significant problems and even some plant shutdowns because of the inability to receive supplies of our products. We're hearing from those customers on a regular basis, and unfortunately, we have been unable to give them any assurance that railroads will be able to restore service to the historical levels. CP's service quality to our plant began to decline around the time of its announced sale to the G&W. CP's service has remained poor since that time. We are seeing transit times on the CP that are doubling or tripling their historic averages. In addition, there have been a significant shortfall in available equipment on the CP system. We have no direct information on the cause of the shortfalls or regarding whatever resource allocation decisions CP may be making with respect to the locomotives, the crews, and the rail cars, but CP has routinely shorted Amcol over the past 2 months on the number of system cars available for our use. In that regard, we historically have received approximately 90 to 120 system cars per week from the CP for service, but during the past 2 months, CP has provided on average only 46 cars. As a result of the CP's deficient service at Colony, we have been required to secure the transportation of bentonite in trucks on an emergency basis. The cost associated with this truck service for February and March alone has been $1.5 million more than we would have paid to move the product on rail. That emergency service involved approximately 350 truck trips. In addition, we estimate that we have lost another $1.5 million in sales during these 2 months because of CP's service delays. BNSF service also has been problematic for us. BNSF service difficulty started in January of this year. As with other CP served plants, our BNSF served plant is Lovell, Wyoming, is running well short of the number of system cars that is needed to meet demand. We estimate that we have lost $1.75 million in sales because of the BNSF service. Again, AMCOL wishes to stress that the current railroad service levels are impacting not only AMCOL, but also our customers and also the broader economy. In conclusion, we thank the board for the opportunity to appear here today, and we respectfully request that the board take all steps in its powers to restore fluidity to the CP and BNSF rail systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Powell?
Chairman Elliott, Vice Chairman Bagman, thank you for your time this afternoon. I know it's been a long day for everybody. And I'm going to move a little bit to passenger railroad. I'm the president of the leading rail vacation and tour company in the United States. We have a subsidiary in the United Kingdom. Rail service and passenger rail is of vital importance to our business, customers, and local economies that rely on the impact of tourism in their community. The continued delays and congestion impact directly the passengers' people, not just oil, coal, agriculture, and other freight. Although over the years Amtrak it's been commonplace to have some delays, recently significant longer delays have negatively impacted our business, our customers' experience, and at times the health and safety of our travelers. In fact, delays in as much as 8 to 10 hours have plagued Amtrak's Empire Builder, Amtrak's daily train operating between Chicago and Seattle. And as a result, literally thousands of Amtrak passengers and their families have suffered extreme inconvenience and often considerable personal expense. And many of these travelers are vacations by rail customers. Delays have resulted in the following: passengers, including families, children, senior citizens, being stranded at times at unstaffed stations as they wait for their train for hours at times. Trains running out of food and water as a result of considerable delays. Problems with laboratories and overall sanitation on board the trains. And passengers at times arriving 8, 10, or sometimes 12 hours late into unfamiliar cities and towns, resulting in no connecting transportation, lack of staff, and security. The inability to rely on published schedules of long-distance trains negatively impacts our business and other people who plan their vacation and holiday travel, because they cannot plan events in the days a train is due to arrive for fear of late arrival. They cannot recommend connecting transportation within 8 hours of a train arrival. And additionally, there's unplanned expenses for companies such as Vacations by Rail and other tour companies when a train arrives considerably late, later than its scheduled arrival time. These delays are really blemishes on the United States government as the owner of the National Railroad Passenger Corporation, and it negatively impacts the equity of Amtrak's brand, which is known throughout the world. These types of delays would not be tolerated in other industries, and certainly not in the airline industry, which now has its own Bill of Rights. What we're asking is that this board establish an oversight committee for passenger rail and assistance for passenger rail, and compel the freight lines and Amtrak to adhere to on-time performance standards and live up to their statutory obligations that they have. And also provide consumers with some type of recourse against the railroads for failure to meet their performance standards. As part of that, we would like to see published Railroad Bill of Rights that allows people compensation in real dollars if trains are delayed, hotel accommodations and meals if trains are delayed for a certain amount of hours, alternate transportation, even by air, if misconnections are the result of the trains being late and connections not being made. Possible full refund of tickets are some of the ideas that we've come up with a Bill of Rights. But not only does this impact our business, but it does impact the local economies. Using Glacier Park as an example, in 2013, Amtrak served over 87,000 passengers to 4 train stations in Glacier National Park. 1/3 of those travelers are typically vacation travelers, and the impact alone on an aggregate level is about $4.6 million per day to the local economy for those passengers staying in that area. This is real money to the local economy, resulting in jobs and opportunity. And when the trains do not run on time, it deters travelers from continuing to choose those destinations that are served by long-distance trains and impedes the ability to spend money in the local economy. In fact, I know that this year alone, some other rail tour operators have changed their itineraries so not to include some of Amtrak's long-distance trains, particularly the Empire Builder, because of the risk that is involved in the trains arriving late. In the last 12 months, Amtrak has been, particularly the Empire Builder, has been 20%, had an on-time performance of 20%, and in February it was only 11.6%. It seems like the answer that Amtrak and BNSF has come up with was to add 3 hours to the schedule of the Empire Builder. The board should ensure that this is only temporary, because what this is really doing is changing the grading scale so that a D is now an A. So we respectfully request that the board look at passenger rail and how it can be involved and provide an oversight made of passengers and consumers so that they can be involved in such decisions as to change schedules and fares and provide recourse for passengers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Questions? Really, I just want to thank you all, especially given I saw you all here this morning, at least most of you at 8:30 or before. Even though you're on the last panel, your testimony is just as important to us as if you were on the first. Ms. Burns, obviously we know that you have been pulling your hair out along with members of our staff trying to prevent shutdowns. Folks here will continue to try to help you. As I said at some point during the day, we are holding the carriers accountable to do what they say they can do, what they will do. They've been clear it is not going to change tomorrow or even next week, but within, let's say, a month, Chicago is supposed to be a lot better. Things are supposed to be a lot better. Maybe 6 weeks was someone's time frame, but I don't consider this to be over when this hearing adjourns. I know I will certainly be monitoring. We'll be looking at the data. We'll be reading the press. We'll be watching. I hope that you will communicate with our customer assistance folks downstairs. I call them downstairs. It's now upstairs from where I'm sitting. But we want to be as helpful as we can, and we also don't want to cause harm, unintended consequences, despite our best intentions. Thank you for your amazing patience. Hang on a little longer.
Just similarly, I just want to thank you very much for coming in today, and I know it's been a long day, and we're, as Vice Chairman mentioned, this is not over. We intend to pursue other meetings like we did in North Dakota and try to work with people as much as possible. We heard some commitments, some very strong commitments from BNSF and CP today, and we do intend to hold them to those commitments, and we will keep pursuing this and keep watching it until the problem is solved. So thank you very much. I think that is the end of the hearing. So thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you for everybody that's helped out today. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, everyone, for your testimony, and the hearing is hereby adjourned.